So, hello and good morning to New York. This is really quite exciting for us. I'm sat here, I'm very privileged to be sat here in Jakarta, in Indonesia, with Sunil, who is the CEO of Busana Group. I'll let him tell you about them a bit later. Now, Sunil and I have met each other just 2 hours ago, and it's already been a great conversation. I'm sure many of you in the room there probably know Sunil, but if you don't, I'm going to give Sunil a chance. Just tell everybody a little bit about, just tell everybody a little bit about Busana Group.
Sure. Firstly, so good morning, New York. Good morning to people, or good evening, or good day, wherever you are. It's nice to be here, Andrew. Thank you. Great to be connected and proud to be part of Cascale and proud to be a member. So yeah, a little bit about Busana. So we are based out of Indonesia, as you know, and we've been here for close to, in fact, 50 years. Next year is going to be our 50th. It is a celebration. Yes, absolutely. We are planning to, and we are it's a family-run company. Always been, and we've now, I would say, we call ourselves in the mid to larger scale in terms of manufacturing. We do multiple and diverse product categories. We have customers again from all over, some very well-known brands. As well. And we now, over the last couple of years, have established some joint ventures in a few other countries in terms of manufacturing. Again, joint ventures as in, partnerships with local people from the respective countries. So we've started some work in Jordan, in Bangladesh, in India, most recently in Central America. And then we have another factory in Ethiopia, which was set up about 7-8 years back.
What sort of products do you do, and sort of how much? What's the sort of capacity of what you're delivering?
Okay, our not considering the joint ventures, our in-house capacities are close to about 50 million units. But we do again multiple product categories, as I said, very diverse. 24 factories in Indonesia, including a couple of 2 integrated laundries. The laundries are for denim, for a lot of washed and casual, bottoms. We also do some dressier bottoms. We are into athleisure. We do, I think we are one of the larger makers of men's shirts, both dress shirts as well as sports shirts. We do ladies soft dressing, and we also do a lot of outerwear. So as I said, it's spread across. We employ close to, I'd say this year, about 34,000 people. And again, proud to say that over 92% of which are actually women. So very pretty stable, workforce. Indonesia is a good country, very disciplined and stable, and it's good to be in this part.
That's great. I mean, it's interesting because the session that we're part of now this morning is chatting climate and consumer goods. And so running through there, the kind of products you're making, apparel is a core consumer good and you're making a lot of it. So what do you see as the connection for Busana with climate and climate issues? And what's your sort of journey been on that?
Okay, yeah, interesting. So I'll come to climate in a bit. Let me take this back, as far as the family is concerned, very frankly, and I'll use the acronym ESG out here, right? ESG for us the journey started, about 40 years back. I'd say 1982, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when, and this comes top down, this comes from the family. Because, at that time it was always about, and we were, of course, at that time we were a much smaller company. It was always about caring about people. So the S part of the ESG actually started for us in 1982. It started with cooperatives wherein we had ownership of from even the worker level as part of the cooperatives, developing communities over a period. And to date, we have them, 45 years later. That'll continue. There's been a host of very many initiatives on the social front. So it's always been strengthening all across to the extent that we have, scholarships for workers, fully funded, university educations and many other initiatives like that. Coming to climate, which is relating to the E part of the ESG, that I would say started somewhere around the 90s. And I'm not talking climate per se directly, which would have an indirect link, which has happened more recently. But from an environmental point of view, we started looking at the utilization of energy, to look at energy savings, to look at how to make goods much more efficiently, more productively. So there was a lot of investments which went into automation and technology year after year.
So the start really on the environmental journey for you was more from a business perspective of more to do with efficiency, cost saving to start with?
I'd say yes and no. To be honest with you, I think the family and our chairman actually and the family believes a lot in just doing it for doing good. One is the business perspective. The second is they are very passionate about just energy savings and how can we make things better? How can we do things better for the world? And how can we do them well? Like I said, the efficiency does come in. I think that's a kind of a byproduct, but there's passion about investing in the best technologies. I think and then I feel it results in us doing well as well. So the whole old quote from I guess it was Benjamin Franklin, right? That how do you do well? By doing good. So I think it's resulted in that. Now, I'd say it's kind of embedded into the culture of the company, so that a lot of leadership and down the level people think like that. Just to give you an example, I think for the last 15 years or so, we've been reinvesting anywhere between $6 to $7 million a year into automation, into machinery.
This is the real nuts and bolts of it. So, I mean, I'm listening to you talk about, which I think is fascinating because it's similar to my journey. My journey started when I was partly because of my mother. My mother drilled into me the importance of people and how you treat people. And so I had a very strong ethical sense and was always very committed to people. I think as I started to look at some of the things happening in the world, it was the people piece that led me into thinking about climate and environment and the things that we need to do. So I've kind of got a very similar journey. And I think what you're getting into now, which would be good to hear a bit more about, is when I say the nuts and bolts is having the ethics, having the values is one thing, but what's the hardcore things you have to do? You're saying $6 or $7 million a year, which is quite a lot, but what kind of things are you investing in and how do you decide? What do you do to make that real change to address these issues?
So look, like I said, it's part of the culture. It's making things better. I think, so regardless of ESG goals, we've never seen it as driving as a target. We've done it because we wanted to do it, right? We wanted to have like the best machines. We wanted to, because that would then end up making a better product. The better efficiency gives us other gains. It kind of led into better attrition rates, lower absenteeism, and therefore then that leads to stability of manpower. And then it leads to better efficiency and therefore profits, or the whole equation between people, profit, and planet all comes together, right? So we kind of see it as a competitive advantage, regardless of how you do it and what you do it in. But over a period of time, it does pay out. Now, to what we've been doing. Sorry, an example was we invested in a LEED Platinum factory, and this was the cost was like twice, but the chairman did not think twice about why we should do it and how we should do it, but he did it because we wanted to. And we applied for, I think, from LEED 101 points. We got 101 points to this date, I believe. So it's a factory which came up in 2017, and over the last few years, I think in terms of size and scale, it is globally the highest rated factory in the world. Now, so that makes us proud. It becomes not only a flagship, but it also sets a benchmark for future investments from our side, which is easier to do when you're looking at scaling up greenfield. And then what you're doing is now you're bringing it all together. You're bringing in planet, you're bringing in climate, you're bringing in environment, and saying by doing this, then you're fulfilling other goals as well.
It's interesting. You said there something that was interesting to me about you see it as a competitive advantage. And I've kind of got two questions here. One of which is, with your customers, the brands, You see it as a competitive advantage. Obviously, you think it gains business, but do you think you get all the sort of value? And I think especially with what's coming on regulation and what's being requested and what's coming from your customers, do you think you're getting all the value you should for the investment and for the work you're doing?
Let's put it this way. I think, if you called it being part of the most favored vendor kind of list, yes, I think from that point of view, this value does come in from a sourcing perspective. Does it come in terms of cost? That's a different story, right? It becomes part of investment. But then look, more business, additional business will lead to that. So I think what we've been working with brands closely is trying to see what their sustainability goals are. Look, in the supply chain, we are pretty much, as a tier one, we are the last mile shipper. So, what we do becomes quite important, although, it's not a significant play in terms of the total GHG or, the carbon emissions. But at the end of the day, it's important. And we feel it is imperative that it's kind of become a need. Right now, the value, I think, if not now, will come at some point of time. There's always, in today's world, in the environment, there is pressure, with rising. I called it the classic issue of the 3 I's last year. There's rise in interest rates, there was rise in inflation, and there was rise in inventory. All the 3 I's came together for us. It's been chaotic. Let's face it. It's not easy out there. Even from the brand's perspective, even from the customer's perspective. I think it'll take some time to get out of this.
I think you're also very kind to your brands and your customers, and they're good to you. But I think it's an interesting one when you talk about. I think I've been reflecting on this. We were talking earlier about it, that you're the last mile, and increasingly there's a lot of pressure on brands from regulation. That's coming increasingly more now. There's the market pressure on the brands, and when I look at the ready-made garment sector, the sector you're in, actually tier one, you're kind of the front line because you're the one that supplies the data, the information that's being requested through regulation. You're the one that's actually having to somehow address the issues in tier 2, tier 3 that you've got beyond, which are the big impacts when it comes to climate, energy, some of the other risk. And so do you think, one of the things I think that's interesting we started talking about is, as that frontline, tier one, do you think there's enough engagement between brands between their sustainability people who are looking for, what's the emissions, what are the environmental issues, and the buyers who come and the supply chain teams who come? Do you think, we talked about this a bit earlier, do you think there could be better engagement there?
Yes, I feel so. Definitely, yes. Look, some of the brands do it really well. Basically, a few of our customers' brands, there's active discussions. I can't say for all of them, right? It'll take time for some brands to evolve over this as well. It depends on their priorities, and depends on how much they're sourcing from us and where they are all sourcing from. So I think it's a journey for the brands as well. Now, having said that, I think work can be done better. We both said that yes, we are the last mile shipper. The question is, how can we link what the brand's requirement is and what the pressure is, and what's truly required from a validation certification or from a traceability certification in terms of emissions, in terms of decarbonization, and how do we actually bring the whole supply chain together? It's not only about us, right? We know that in terms of tier one, it's a single digit emission rate. But when you have tier 2 sitting in the same room with the brand and you, and then you have a tier 3 sitting in the same room, so it's identifying the whole supply chain, and I think that's what the brands need to do more. I feel it's one area which, if you bring all the players together and say, now this is a joint goal, then we can do better. I think it's not about the brand needing it; it's we needing it together. So the whole thing has to change from I to we.
Yeah, and the success is only going to come if all of those different players are actively involved, actively engaged, understand the challenges. In that context, I'm going to be very selfish from a Cascale perspective. We provide, we work with you, and I have to say thank you for joining. You joined us, I think, in July. one of our newest members, and we're very proud to have you. How do you find, one, I'll ask two questions. First one around, how do you find utilizing the tools that we have, such as the FEM and FSLM? What sort of value do they bring to you?
I'd say we've been part of the FEM now, I guess, or part of Hagen and the tools. I think we've been utilizing it for a while, but this is a must. I think the validations are necessary. It sets benchmarks for us, it's a continuous improvement process, right? And I think it also keeps us active in terms of what's next. Where do we need to go from here? So from that perspective, definitely yes. It's great to be part of Cascale, and then the fact that I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're the largest coalition, right, or the only coalition.
We're the largest in the industry, in the consumer goods industry, in the fashion apparel industry, and that was sort of my second question: is how. And one of the reasons I can't be in New York is we're taking a really determined and intentional approach to engage much more with the manufacturing community, because we recognize that a lot of these issues and challenges, ultimately the solutions are through the work that is done with the manufacturing community. And so I'm spending time here now out in Asia for 3.5 weeks. Colin, our new CEO, was here for a couple of months not long ago. He'll be back again in November. So what the things we're trying to do is to listen more. So what do you think, what more value, and where do you think Cascale can play a role in helping the industry move forward and address these big issues that we have?
A great question. I guess firstly is setting up benchmarks, and then as a facilitator, as a collaborator, I would say, bringing people together. Like I mentioned, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, along with the brands. I think Cascale can play a major role between that and then setting, joint initiatives. I think that you need somebody like that, right? Otherwise, it's all siloed. You talk and then talks fizzle out after a few months. Even within brands, I feel, Cascale can possibly talk to, okay, I know you're talking to all the sustainability teams. I'm sure now you're talking to sourcing teams as well. And a lot of times, interpretations can be different, right? So the question is, how do we all actually come to a common goal together? And I think that's a role which, Cascale needs to play, and saying, okay, this is what we need to do. And, let's take a step forward, and what can you do? And then let's put it together. I think that's going to go a great way in trying to, I don't know why I'm looking for the right word, but getting us closer. And then we know we are part of a coalition and a joint group. Right.
No, thank you for that. I think it's really valuable. And I also think it comes at a point, it's like an inflection point for us as well. I think when you look at, the scale of the challenges we have, whether it's climate or decent work for everybody, that scale of those challenges, we actually have regulation now that's starting to raise the bar and hopefully set really good foundations. I think those things together, actually, it's really encouraging to hear what you say, because I feel you're right, we have an opportunity as Cascale. I very often say this, I feel like a responsibility, because we do represent, the manufacturing community and the brands and retailers and representatives from other NGOs. And so I feel that also is a responsibility that we have.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned the word regulation, out of, I think the one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, out of the ESG part was governance, right? Because it's now coming in, and it's now, it's no longer good to do. It's like you have to do. You have to, with what's happening in Europe, particularly, starting next year, there's mandatory declarations to be given. And then, and I think one of the challenges is going to be validations. Right, because data is coming. It's all about data integrity. It's about who's actually measuring and how is it being measured. Sustainability has become extremely complex, as we can see over the last few years. Right, so there's going to be some questions asked. There's going to be some challenges ahead, and I think if we work together, and look, we've seen the changes in climate. Right, we've seen what's happening globally. and it's already, I think, the tipping point has been reached. If not last year, now a few years back. And then I think regulations are going to become much more stronger, and I know they are higher in certain countries, but I feel it's just a matter of time where it'll become that it's going to become part of scorecards. It's going to become part of mandatory requirement for even manufacturers like us, right?
So I guess in that, if I was to sort of summarize that, it's a bit like what was and should have been always a moral imperative, which is still a moral imperative, actually really does also need to shift, and with regulation, hopefully, to become, operational business inbuilt, and it's part of business operations. It's a business mandate. It's actually what you have to do, I think, with the regulation, and I think that, along with the moral imperative, is quite a strong case.
Absolutely. I think with the way the markets are going forward, look, let's not talk about even our generation. The next, I think 2 or 3 to come. We've seen the impact of transparency and traceability, right? It's going to come much more stronger going forward. The whole aspect of circularity. Consuming less. How do we haven't even touched upon that, recycling and circularity. And then, so I think these are going to become the way of the future. And more important is, how do we manage data? And how do we actually, put things out there that are going to be, like I said, integrity is going to become key. And I think for manufacturers like us, and that's something which we have to do jointly, right? It's going to become an absolute requirement.
Absolutely, more than anything else. I think we're probably coming to about our time now. Before I sort of close, is there any, with a room full of people in New York talking about climate and consumer goods, is there anything you want to leave the people with in terms of a last comment, thought, challenge, call to action? You can do whatever.
I think the call to action would be, I don't want to sound repetitive, but, I think let's identify the players in the supply chain, who are the key players, and, let's put them in a room together, and let's talk together. There's the Paris Accord, and, that's huge. I'm not going general. I'm not going, Copenhagen. I'm not going, massive thing. I'm talking now, let's go down to the grassroots level at, brand to brand, and then, 2, 3, 4 of them coming together, and then talking to, 4 or 5 suppliers together, and then saying, okay, these are the common mills, and let's put this. I think it has to start from there, and then we kind of build it up, right? And once that happens, I think, and then people see some traction, I think more and more people will get into it. So I think that's the next step, and I feel if that can be achieved, then we've already got a great starting point.
Fantastic. I was gonna try and summarize, but you actually summarized that really well yourself. I think that was a great sort of conclusion to the conversation. We do need to do it. We do need to come together. I think what you said there is also important. Is it's actually not about being aspirational. It's actually about doing the work and actually getting the people together to talk about the solutions and make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sunil, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Andrew, thank you, and welcome again to Jakarta, and good to have you here. And look forward to engaging more with you, with Cascale, and with our brands and supply chain partners.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your time this morning.
Thank you. Take care.